Most people believe they are their thoughts. Every idea that appears feels personal. Every emotion feels like identity. Every inner voice feels like truth. But this is the oldest illusion of the human mind. You are not the thought. You are the one noticing the thought. And that difference is everything. The Stoics knew this long before psychology had names for it. They trained themselves to watch their impressions before accepting them. A thought would arise. They would pause. They would examine. Is this true? Is this useful? Is this within my control? If not, they let it pass. This simple act created the observer's advantage. Modern psychology calls this metacognition, the ability to think about thinking, the ability to step outside the mind while still using the mind. This skill predicts emotional resilience, stress tolerance, decision clarity, and even long-term happiness. But most people never develop it. They live inside the stream, carried wherever the current flows. Imagine sitting beside a river. Thoughts are water passing. Most people fall into the river and are swept away by every current. The observer sits on the bank watching calmly. The river still flows, but it no longer controls them. This is the foundation of inner freedom. Without the observer, every thought becomes command. Every emotion becomes law. Every fear becomes prophecy. Every craving becomes necessity. But with the observer, thoughts become options. Emotions become signals. Fear becomes information. Cravings become temporary sensations. You regain authorship of action. The Stoics trained this through daily reflection. Each evening they reviewed the day. Where did I act without awareness? Where did I surrender to impulse? Where did I remain conscious? This was not self-criticism. It was awareness training. Strengthening the observer muscle. Modern therapy uses the same method. Cognitive defusion, mindfulness, self-observation, different words. Same ancient truth. You are not your mind. You are the awareness behind the mind. Most modern suffering comes from identification. I am anxious. I am angry. I am broken. I am unworthy. But these are experiences, not identities. The observer sees anxiety arise and says, a feeling is here, not I am anxiety. This subtle shift dissolves the grip of suffering. This is why two people can experience the same event and suffer differently. One fuses with the experience. The other observes it. One becomes the storm. The other watches the storm. The observer's advantage is not emotional suppression. It is emotional space. Feelings still come. But they come with room around them. They do not crush. They do not drown. They move through. The Stoics called this inner citadel, a part of you untouched by events, untouched by opinions, untouched by fate. That citadel is the observer. In modern life, the observer is constantly attacked. Notifications demand immediate reaction. Media pushes emotional contagion. Outrage cycles pull attention. Fear-based headlines hijack imagination. The untrained mind fuses instantly. The trained observer watches first. This is why awareness is the ultimate defense in the information age. The observer's advantage also sharpens decision-making. When you can step outside impulse, you see more options. You notice hidden assumptions. You detect emotional bias. You choose responses instead of default reactions. This is the difference between living deliberately and living accidentally. Children naturally have moments of pure observation. They watch clouds. They stare at shadows. They ask simple questions. But adulthood trains constant doing, constant thinking, constant reacting. The observer fades. And with it, inner peace. Reawakening the observer is returning to original clarity. This is why meditation exists across cultures. Not as religion, as technology of observation. Sit, watch breath. Notice thoughts, return attention. Over time, the observer strengthens. identification weakens, freedom grows. The Stoics did not use meditation cushions. They used life itself. Every provocation was practice. Every frustration was training. Every delay was awareness exercise. They turned daily irritation into observer training. You can do the same. When stuck in traffic, observe impatience. When criticized, observe defensiveness. When craving distraction, observe urge. Observation is always available. The observer also ends internal war. Many people fight their thoughts, try to suppress, try to force positivity, try to control inner experience. But fighting strengthens what you fight. Observation dissolves it naturally. A thought noticed loses half its power. A fear observed shrinks. An urge watched fades. This is psychological alchemy. The observer's advantage also deepens self-knowledge. You start noticing patterns, same triggers, same stories, same emotional loops. Once seen clearly, patterns lose mystery. And what loses mystery can be changed. This is why self-awareness precedes self-mastery. The Stoics taught that you cannot control what appears in the mind, but you can control whether you follow it. That is the observer's work, not preventing thoughts, but choosing which thoughts become actions. Freedom is not controlling the mind. Freedom is not being controlled by the mind. As this skill grows, life slows internally. External events may stay fast, but your inner pace becomes steady, calm, spacious, clear. You feel less rushed, less pressured, less desperate. You become someone who responds to life, not someone life happens to. The observer's advantage also protects identity. When you observe thoughts about yourself, you stop believing every narrative. I am not enough becomes a thought, not truth. I always fail becomes a pattern, not destiny. You gain distance from self-judgment. This distance is healing. Over time, the observer becomes home. No matter what happens, there is a place inside you watching quietly. A place that cannot be insulted, cannot be frightened, cannot be broken. That place is always here. This is the quiet center the Stoics lived from, the inner citadel, the observing self. And once you know how to return there, no chaos can take you away from yourself. This is the foundation. In part 2, we go deeper into the observer in emotional healing, the observer in conflict, the observer in temptation, the observer in identity transformation, the observer as lifelong freedom. The observer in emotional healing is where real recovery begins. Many people try to heal by changing their emotions, fixing their past, or rewriting their story. But healing accelerates the moment you stop merging with every feeling. When sadness appears and you observe it instead of becoming it, the nervous system relaxes. When fear appears and you witness it instead of obeying it, the body learns safety. When old memories arise and you watch without drowning, the past loosens its grip. Observation is gentle exposure. It teaches the mind that emotions are visitors, not owners. Modern trauma psychology confirms this. When a person can observe internal experience without being overwhelmed, the brain rewires. Emotional charge decreases. Self-trust increases. The Stoics practiced this without clinical language. They sat with discomfort. They watched their impressions. They allowed inner turbulence without surrendering to it. This is why their writings feel calm even when describing suffering. They were not inside the storm. They were studying it. The observer in conflict changes everything. In arguments, most people fuse with the story. I am right. They are wrong. I am attacked. I must defend. The observer notices the tightening chest, the rising heat, the urge to strike back. And in that noticing, a door opens. You can still speak. You can still set boundaries, but now your words come from clarity, not combustion. You remain in the driver's seat. This is why the calmest person in the room often controls the room, not through force, through presence. Presence is simply observation embodied. When you are not tangled in reaction, others feel it. They slow down. They listen. They adjust. Your inner observer becomes a social stabilizer. The observer in temptation is quiet strength. A craving appears. The mind says, I need this now. The body leans forward. Most people obey instantly. But the observer watches the urge like a wave. It rises. It peaks. It falls. You discover something shocking. You were never forced. You simply forgot to watch. When you observe desire, you reclaim choice. This applies to distractions, impulses, unhealthy habits, emotional outbursts, and compulsive behaviors. You do not need to fight the urge. Fighting feeds it. You only need to watch it. Observation starves impulse of automatic power. The Stoics trained this when they practiced voluntary discomfort. They noticed hunger without panicking, cold without dramatizing, boredom without escaping. They learned that the body can feel discomfort while the observer remains calm. This is mastery over impulse. The observer in identity transformation is the final unlock. As long as you believe every story your mind tells about who you are, identity stays rigid. But when you observe self-stories, they loosen. I am not good enough becomes a thought passing by. I always fail becomes an old script, not destiny. I must be like becomes a habit, not law. Once seen, identity becomes editable. This is where transformation becomes possible. You are no longer trying to fix a broken self. You are simply choosing which story to keep and which to release. The observer is the editor of identity. Modern psychology calls this narrative flexibility. The Stoics called it wisdom. Same truth. Different age. The observer also protects you from emotional contagion. In groups, moods spread fast. Panic spreads. Anger spreads. Excitement spreads. The observer notices the atmosphere without absorbing it. You feel the room without becoming the room. This is emotional intelligence at its peak. This is why seasoned leaders walk into chaos and remain calm. They observe before they absorb. They choose before they join. They respond instead of mimic. The observer is also the source of intuition. Intuition is subtle. It does not shout. It whispers. If your mind is noisy, you never hear it. When you cultivate observation, inner guidance becomes clear. You sense when something is off. You sense when a path is right, not from impulse, but from quiet knowing. This is why silence and observation always walk together. The observer in daily life turns ordinary moments into training. Washing dishes becomes awareness practice. Walking becomes awareness practice. Listening becomes awareness practice. Waiting becomes awareness practice. Life itself becomes meditation. The Stoics did not separate philosophy from living. Every moment was a chance to practice seeing clearly. The observer also dissolves overthinking. Overthinking is simply thinking without awareness. Thoughts chasing thoughts endlessly. But when you observe thinking, the chain breaks naturally. You see a thought arise. You do not feed it. It fades. Mental noise reduces without force. This is why mindfulness works. Not because it adds something, because it subtracts identification. The observer is also the key to forgiveness. When you observe your own pain, you understand the pain of others. You see that hurt people, not as excuse, as clarity. And clarity softens resentment. Forgiveness becomes release, not effort. The observer also deepens gratitude. When you observe life without rushing past it, you notice breath, light, sound, presence. Gratitude becomes natural, not forced. And gratitude stabilizes mental health more than any external achievement. The observer is the anchor of inner peace. Not peace as absence of problems, peace as non-attachment to turbulence. This is what the Stoics meant when they said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. The observer is that power. Over time, the observer becomes your true home, not the stories, not the labels, not the emotions, not the thoughts, but the awareness behind them all. Once you recognize this, something profound happens. You stop searching for yourself in success, in relationships, in status, in validation. You realize you were always here, watching quietly. This realization is freedom, not escape from life, not detachment from love, not cold distance, but clear, steady, warm awareness that can engage fully without losing itself. This is the observer's advantage. The mind becomes tool, not tyrant. Emotion becomes signal, not sentence. Identity becomes choice, not cage. And when you live from this place, life does not push you around. You move with it, calm, clear, unshaken.